We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today. Good evening, welcome to NUFC Matters. It is the Supermac and Gibbo show. We're still missing our man. He's on the sick bed still, but he's home, John, which is the main thing. And we're just waiting now for news, really, to see how things will develop. But he's all right. We've spoken to Carol, haven't we, both of us, over the course of the last 7 days. And still in a lot of pain, Supermac.
It's a small step forward, which is something coming out of hospital and getting back in your own environment. It's a small step forward. I think mobility's a problem for him at the moment, but fingers crossed. It's a slow job, and we never anticipate anything being slow with Supermac, do we? Everything was 10 seconds for 100 meters sort of thing. But life's a funny old game, and it there, but for the grace of God. But the steps are in the right direction, so fingers crossed that shortly the terrible trio will be back together.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you to everybody in the chat, and over the course of the last 7 days, people messaging, asking how he is, and passing on the best. And I do convey those messages to Carol, and Malcolm gets them, and it's certainly getting them through a difficult time at the moment. So thank you for that. Okay, let's look back at 2 games, John. Not very often we do this, but we've got, of course, the Carabao Cup, which we'll come to, but Manchester City at the weekend. Will the real Newcastle please stand up, John? And they certainly did at the weekend.
They did. It was wonderful. And I think it was by far our best display of the season, over 90 minutes. Yes, it was a draw and we've won games, but we had to play the way we did to get something out of this game. And we thoroughly deserved to get something out of the game, Steve. I thought a lot of the blue chip players who have been waiting to hit top form and been a little bit worried that they've all been off form together, did hit top form in this game, and it was a joy to see. And I mean, Gordon, I was even more depressed before the game when I got up to St James's Park and got the team sheet and realised Isaac wasn't going to make it because it's the one place with a possibility of goalkeeper where we haven't got a significant somebody to come in. But Gordon switched across there, did terrific on the day. Tonali's some player, and he just confirmed that he's been worth waiting for. And both Bruno and Joe Linton looked a lot better than they have looked. So it was a terrific display, thoroughly enjoyed. And the big man, Haaland, who scored 100 goals in 106 games for City, drew his usual blank against us. He scored once in 5 games against us. And, I think he bullies defenders, Haaland, because he's big and he's powerful. But big Dan Burn takes some bullying. I think it would take Grace Monument to bully Dan Burn because that's the one thing where he's pretty good at fighting his weight. And well done him, but it was a terrific performance. It was the Newcastle United we know and love, and it gave us hope that, perhaps we're going to get onto an even keel and start producing performances, because if you do, your results come along as well.
Yeah, they certainly do. Good point against the champions. Then we moved on to Carabao Cup, the rearranged Carabao Cup game, which was originally supposed to be at Plough Lane, and then obviously the pitch collapsed due to bad weather. So from our perspective, we had a full house at St James's for an old friend, Wimbledon. Not the original Wimbledon, I hasten to add. They're now MK Dons, but yeah, it was good to see so many people who probably don't get the opportunity to go to the match go. But it wasn't a barnstorming performance, was it?
No, I mean, it was probably good to get 50,000 there, but it probably wasn't when some of them saw what they saw, because, the two words that jump to mind is boring and dull, because that's what it was. I mean, it was a good, when you think about it, Steve, a big hole in the ground and awful. And yes, the game had to be transferred up here, but in lots of ways, they got the reward because the game was transferred up here. They get 45% of the gate. The gate was 51,000. The capacity at Plough Lane is 9,300. So the gate receipts immediately tell you how much larger they were up here. Plus the fact we're stuck 15 grand in that skyrocket to help get a load of soil to stick down the hole in the pitch. So it worked out for them, and they left with their dignity. I mean, they were only the League Two side. They were only beaten on a Premier League ground by a penalty. And in fairness, I wasn't too fussed, because I never thought we were going to lose. I mean, we had a whopping 80% of the play, and I don't think they had a meaningful shot on goal, to be truthful. But it was just turgid, and we had 8 changes, 2 more at half time, etc., etc. It was one of those things that was never going to be a great advert, and even Eddie, who's a lovely fence sitter, admitted at the end of the game it will quickly fade from memory, and it's faded from mine double quick, because I'm not there. I don't like nightmares. So
Yeah.
the bottom line, Steve, the bottom line is we're in the last 16 of the League Cup, and if we get to Wembley, no Newcastle fan will be saying, but wasn't it awful against Wimbledon there when we played Wimbledon? Nobody will care monkeys when you get to Wembley, if you get to Wembley.
Yeah, big game coming up, of course, Chelsea in the next round, and we'll be looking at that. It's great. It's a great tie. Chance to get them, put one over them for knocking us out last year as well. So it couldn't be a better tie, twice in a week as well. We'll be looking forward to that later this month. Okay, plenty of questions have come in, John. So let's get stuck into them. YI Magpie was first up this evening. How do you guys feel about the possibility of leaving St James's Park for a new stadium? Lots of talk, lots of chatter, because obviously we had the feasibility study with regards to the ground. Newcastle have published the details of the latest fan advisory board meeting that took place earlier this week, and among the topics, John, were the ongoing feasibility study into the future home of the club, either at an extended St James's Park or perhaps another site. The Chief Operating Officer, Brad Miller, has said that the study was progressing, but not quite at the decision-making stage yet. No significant update is due until 2025. So that is interesting. I mean, that is news of a sort. We're nowhere near a decision, John.
Yeah, I think, and it's understandable, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime decision. What happens here will define Newcastle's immediate future and way beyond immediate. And obviously, there's a very, very big decision to make. The simple part of it being, do we try to do it on the site we're on now, or do we go to a new stadium, as so many other clubs, Arsenal, etc., have all done? And that's heart-wrenching, and that's going to split opinion regardless of what decision that is, because a lot of people, especially older people with great memories of St James's Park, would love to stay on that site if at all possible. Younger people, perhaps, because we've been there 130 years, for goodness sake, so you don't give that up easily. But at the same time, it's no good increasing the St James's Park from 52,000 to say 62,000, because that isn't enough. You've got to be able to increase it to a considerable size, at least 80,000, to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, you go to a new ground, and we know the problems with that is the fact that you've got what is surrounding St James's Park, which is limiting to what you can do. You can go upwards, but how far backwards can you go? And I think Newcastle are right to take that time in making what is going to be a momentous decision. And whatever decision is made, Steve, there's going to be objections to it, because if we stay where we are, a lot of young fans are going to be saying, why don't we move just out of town and get a 90,000 stadium? And if we go away from St James's Park, traditionalists are going to say, after 130 years, and it's so beautifully situated in the centre of the city, that we're sacrificing. A lot would depend, of course, if we are to move, where we move to, because the location is very important. We wouldn't want to be hugely out of town. So I think Newcastle are right to take their time over this, and it's got to make financial sense to the Saudis as well. It's got to be a value for money decision. But we'll wait and see what comes out of it, and see what the reasoning is behind it.
Yeah, I mean, look, if moving the stadium to Leazes Park is an option, I think I could cope with that. I'd be sad is the word, I think, John, if we had to move from St James's Park, because that's where all the memories are, John. And that was a question why I Magpie asked us. How would you feel if we had to move stadiums? I think it would be manageable. I think you wouldn't feel as if it was a move if it was Leazes Park, but
yeah,
if it was at the airport, for example, or another site, I mean, it would be a hard one to take, John.
It would, and it's such an impressive sight. The cathedral on the hill, it does dominate the skyline of Newcastle as a city, and the fact that it's right there in the city, which a lot of clubs haven't got, is another important part. As you say, if you're moving to Leazes Park, you're almost not moving, if you know what I mean. That's all right. But if you're suddenly ending up anywhere as far out as the airport or that sort of thing, it is a totally new ball game. Let's not try to second guess. It's interesting. I'll let the fans do that and mull over it. But I would like to see a solution that says, let's stay where we are, or as close to where we are with a new stadium as possible.
Yeah. Darren, thanks for that, mate. I hadn't heard this. He says, hi, Steve and John. Just to let you know, Newcastle Benfield have parted company with Paul Brayson after a 15-year career with the Lions. We all wish Paul the best in the future. Darren, that's breaking news. Brassy's a cracking lad. I've known him for years. And that is sad. He's a non-league legend, John. Of course, formerly of a Newcastle player, didn't quite make the grade.
As a boy, he was with us, wasn't he? And he's done superb over the years in non-league football. I mean, but it's like everything, isn't it, Steve? The world never stops still. I mean, Gateshead have lost to Rob Elliott from Newcastle United, who took over from Mike Williamson of Newcastle United at Gateshead, and all of a sudden, I feel sorry for Gateshead, because they were doing so well with a board that really is fan motivated and are basically just fans. They did so well under Mike Williamson. They lost Mike Williamson. They promoted Rob Elliott internally, and he did terrific. But the minute you do terrific with a club like Gateshead, you're doing it against all the odds financially, because they can't compete with other clubs in the National League. And so you then get taken away. And Rob Elliott won at Wembley last season with Gateshead, and it was inevitable I think that he was going to go somewhere. But non-league football suffers. Right at the other end of the scale, Blythe, Spartans, who have a huge history in non-league football and this great FA Cup record and everything, they're on the bones of their backside at the moment and are struggling against a possible second relegation in successive seasons. And their fans, who are very loyal to the club and normally support in numbers, their fans are up in arms and talking about a boycott over the new owners, etc., etc. So, we've had difficult times at St James's Park with the Ashley years, etc., etc. But if you go down into non-league, the scene's not much different. Life can be a turmoil for fans, whatever level you're at.
Yeah, agreed. So the Gateshead news was really, really sad. So let's hope that they get a new man in. I think Ben Clark stepped into the breach for the next game or so. So he's a Gateshead stalwart. But it'll be interesting to see who they get. I sadly think that the issue with Gateshead, and this is just my opinion, of course, is that financially, that they're always going to struggle when a big team comes calling. People like Rob have got to look after themselves. He's.
Of course I have. Oh, I don't blame Rob for one moment. It's if you're going to get a chance in the league, you've got to take it. You've worked miracles on a shoestring budget to get it. It was exactly the same with Mike Williamson. It was inevitable. Mike was going to leave, and he left for MK Dons, and now he's at Carlisle. And Rob's gone down that same thing. So my sadness is for a board that try as hard as the Gateshead board do. A point well in Williamson, a point well in Rob Elliott, and then almost because they've done so well, they lose that guy, and they're always going to lose that guy because they're not. I mean, you get teams with 7,000 and 8,000 gates in the National League, and Gateshead can't compete with that, so they're going to lose their managers, and that's the way life is. But it swings and roundabouts. They'll come again, and they've kept coming. And I hope Blythe suddenly get some sort of support and stability down there. We had Nobby Solano there at the beginning of the season, but it's been absolute turmoil down there for a couple of years now. And now, as you say, the Benfield situation has changed. But that's football. That's life in football, isn't it?
It is. Alan Thompson says, Stephen John, I was sad to give up my 20-year video recorder. But times move on. 80,000-seater stadium at Castle Leazes is the obvious choice, but will the council allow it? Yano says the second string had the opportunity to showcase their talent and make a bid for first-team football against Wimbledon. And apart from Miggy Almiron, not many made a case for future inclusion. And good evening to Barry, who's in the chat. Somebody asking where was Barry on Monday on the fans forum. He fell asleep. That's what happened to Barry. So good to see you're awake and in the chat tonight, Barry. You were missed on Monday. It must be nice to hear that anyway. Stephen Kennedy as well, just reiterating what a lot of people have said. Pass on me good wishes to Mal. Hope he's back on the show and in the press box soon. Just don't mention Chris Wood, he says. And
why have you mentioned him then?
Stephen Kennedy, good evening. He says, John, who do you think's to blame for us not having a viable striker as backup to Isaac? Is it Eddie's famous stubborn streak, or should the blame be deflected to those higher in the food chain? We can all see the problems it causes. We've seen it for over 2 years now. Surely those above Eddie with any idea about football should know goals win games. And no goals, no wins, no Europe. It's an interesting question, interesting way of putting it, and probably means we can bring in a chat about Asula as well, because he got an opportunity to play against Wimbledon. So what's your take on the striking situation at the minute, John?
Well, it's absolutely puzzled me for 3 or 4 transfer windows now, I've got to say. It really has, and you can't exclude, I'm a great Eddie fan at what he's done for us. I'm thrilled to bits about, and I believe in the man, etc. But you can't excuse the manager for the decisions made about the centre forward, because if he was pushing for that position to be filled, it would eventually be filled. He's a great believer in Callum Wilson, and that is the problem. Is he too loyal, Eddie? Sometimes you've got to say yes. Does he think that Callum, who was terrific in the dressing room and is a vibrant personality and is an optimistic personality, keeps telling the manager, "Oh, I'll be fit, so don't worry, I'll be there." Probably the answer to that is yes. But the simple thing, standing 3 steps back, is this is nothing new. This is nothing new, Steve, about having a problem when Isaac doesn't play. I mean, we've had that for 2 or 3 windows now. You cannot rely on Callum Wilson. Well, you can rely on him to be injured. And that's the truth of the matter. I've seen the invisible man more than I've seen Callum. I mean, I've forgotten what he looks like. It's not good enough to say he's a quality player if he's not fit. I mean, we're into October now, and he got injured pre-season in Germany and wasn't even in a game. So if he was fit tomorrow, how sharp is he? He hasn't had a pre-season training. He hasn't played in any games. But this is nothing new. This is a problem we've had for a while. And it's no good saying, well, he's a wonderful centre forward if he's never available. Supermac was a wonderful centre forward, but I don't want him to be playing on Saturday because it's a little bit too late for that. I mean, that's the way it is with this guy. And really, it's the one position where we have no cover whatsoever. The fullback positions, right and left, are covered. We've got 4 or 5 choices in midfield. We've got Gordon and Barnes for outside left. We've got Miggy and Murphy and Gordon for outside right. We haven't got cover for centre forward because I love Anthony to death, but Anthony Gordon's a winger. He does a magnificent job filling in at centre forward, but he's a winger. He's not a 25-goal centre forward like Isaac is. So and it could yet come home. I know we got away with it against Man City with a terrific display from Gordon. We got away with it against Wimbledon in the League Cup, but it was against League Two opposition. Will we get away with it at Everton? Would we get away with it if, when we come back from the international break and we've all of a sudden got Brighton and Chelsea and Arsenal, we wouldn't want to go into those games, and I think Isaac will be fit by then, but we wouldn't want to go into those games without a centre forward. And Osula is what he is. He was brought in as a third choice centre forward. And for 10 million down, becoming 15 million, if you're a Premier League club at the top end of the table, what you get is a third choice centre forward. And that's what we got. And I think the boy has got blistering pace. He can run in behind people. He can do things. I think he's got a good future. But it's a future. He's not the present. He's the future. And we are so vulnerable in that position, and we've shown so much loyalty to Callum. I find it frightening because professionally, I think, in my humble opinion, that it's the wrong decision. Now you can't exclude the manager from that decision because you can't expect the chairman or the guy that does the scouting or the director of sport to force a good centre forward on the manager. The manager should be knocking on the director of sports door and saying, "Listen, pal, you better get me a centre forward because if we don't make Europe this season, it will be because we haven't had a backup teaser." But we know that Eddie's not doing that. And Eddie's gambling on Callum getting fit again and gambling on Gordon filling in the meantime. But I tell you what, the key word there is gamble, because that is what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I genuinely think Osula, we can see as well why he hasn't been rushed into the Premier League. He's a young lad. He's not the finished article. I love the fact that the fans in the Gallagher corner had come up with their own song for him, and I think certainly the second half he put himself about a bit more. But the first half, he was ploughing a lone furrow, and it's so difficult playing as a one up front. You've got to be, act at it all the time. So yeah, it's a one to watch. Be interesting to see what happens. Wilson will depart, one would imagine, and we'll have to bring somebody else in. Good evening to Carl in the chat. It's a serious question, guys. Do you think Sunderland will get promoted? I mean, I do the Northeast podcast on a Saturday with Ted the Mackin and Rye from Borough. I've got to be honest, I still think Middlesbrough and Sunderland are pretty neck and neck call this season. If they can keep a hold of the players between now and the end of the season, I think they've both got a chance of being in the playoffs, and then it's a lottery call. So that's my honest opinion about Sunderland this season. But they've got off to a good start.
I tell you what, though, and this isn't being cruel, and this is not having my silly hat on as a Newcastle United supporter and saying we don't want I hope Sunderland come up, because when we played them last season in the League Cup, it'll be a stroll in the park for us if they come up for 6 points. But the trouble now, Steve. Anybody that comes up from the Championship, apart from you, they go straight back down, don't they? The gulf is huge.
More or less. Yeah, it's getting bigger.
The gulf is huge. And I can't see the current Sunderland squad being an established Premier League side. They would have to get up, I think, if they're going to get up via the playoffs. But I think both them and Middlesbrough are well short of Premier League standing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they couldn't get up through the playoffs, but they would find it tough going if they did. Look at Southampton, who went down again, come back up. And that they're trailing already, just waiting in the departure lounge to go back to the Championship.
Yeah, you're right. I agree, Carl. It would be nice to get the derby again. I do enjoy it. Win, lose or draw. I love the build up to it. And obviously we had a derby last season. We won it at a canter, but it's great. Nothing beats Newcastle Sunderland for me. It is the best game of the season when we have it. It's the one you look for. But good luck. We'll see what happens over the course of the next few months down the road and see whether you can make it back up. We're going to have a question for after the adverts, so I'll let you have a think of this, John, because it's quite a question. Lee says, question for John and Steve: in your time of supporting Newcastle, what are your top 5 most cringeworthy moments as a fan?
Oh,
yeah. So I think what we'll do is we'll come up with 5 between with John. So maybe if you can have a think, cringeworthy moments, and we'll come up with 5 between. Otherwise, we'll take up the full second half with that. So we'll come back. We will come back to that. And Tom Dixon, you're right. Congratulations, of course, to Pope and Gordon, who've been picked for England. Livramento not called up this time. I don't think that's a surprise, John. He's not had much game time over the course of the last month, has he?
I was going to say, Trips has already taken over his place in the Newcastle team, at least temporarily. Livramento will become an England international. Time's on his side. I'm not in the least surprised he hasn't made it this time. I'm glad Pope is one of the backup keepers because he deserves that, and he didn't deserve to go out in the first place. Gordon's nailed on with England.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, looking forward to watching Gordon's progress. And, he's got to play well for his club to get back into the England setup time and time again. So what benefits England benefits us as well. Alan Thompson says, I'd love to have a derby county for me, John and Steve. I'm not quite sure that's what we're talking about, Alan. But, it's given us a laugh, mate. We'll have an ad break. We'll be back after this. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at skipsandbins.com. Contact them, www.skipsandbins.com/contact. Say hello to low-cost waste disposal with pay-as-you-go and contract waste management. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Telephone 01768 210 102 or email info@mrvickies.co.uk. Thanks to our NUFC Matters fanzine sponsor, United Group Travel. Travel and Tourism Award winners 2024. There are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. All excursions included, 3-star plus quality hotels, no interchanges, a 2-crew driver and courier. It's a local family company, and you can find them at www.unitedgrouptravel.com or telephone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. Big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the technical side of things. And if you want to help support the channel, hit the subscribe button. We do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up under the video. That's the like button. It does help us grow. And click the share button. Help share to your social media. If you want to join the channel for as little as $1.99 a month, then hit the join button under this video today. We also help the food bank on this channel. Visit nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk. It takes you to the match day bucket where you can donate some money virtually. Some events for your diary in aid of Dementia Matters. The Long Sands will be reforming and be supported by Lilac Lane and the Chris Norris Band at the Cluny in Newcastle on Saturday, January the 4th, 2025. Tickets are £15 pre-sale from newcastlelegends.com. An evening with Peter Beardsley takes place at the Tyneside Irish Centre on the 10th of January 2025. Tickets available from newcastlelegends.com or from Woucher. And an evening with the Entertainers takes place on the 24th of January 2025. Telephone the box office 0844 249 1000 or visit the website tynetheatreandoperahouse.uk. And the Magpie Lounge at the Gateshead Leisure Centre is now open. 7 tokens for £99. Joe Allen will be hosting tokens with Lee Clark, John Anderson, Steve Howie, Darren Peacock, Supermac, Steve Watson, John Beresford, all between the dates of January and July. £99 for 7 tokens, newcastlelegends.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to our NUFC Matters fanzine, £20 for 4 issues with all proceeds going to Dementia Matters. If you live overseas, it is £50 for 4 issues. To order now, go to newcastlelegends.com. Okay, welcome back. Some cringeworthy moments. My God, we are getting some wonderful suggestions. But first up, I'm going to speak to John, see what he came up with. Go for it, John. What are your cringeworthy moments?
Well, there's been loads of them. I mean, one that immediately come to mind was seeing a London taxi driver knock us out of the FA Cup when we played it against non-league Hereford down at Hereford. Everybody talks about Ronnie Radford's goal, but it was a London taxi driver, George, that actually scored the winning goal. And I'd seen him the previous night in a nightclub in Hereford at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he was given it the upsy-daisy in the nightclub. And when asked why he was doing that was such a big game the next season, he said, the next day, he said, well, I'm only a London taxi driver, mate. I'm not even in the team. I'm a part-timer. I'm just enjoying myself. The next day, they bring him on and he scores a winner against a top first division club. That made me cringe. I mean, in no particular order, I cringed virtually all the time during the Ashley years, particularly when the Wally with the Brolly was a manager at Newcastle, Steve McLaren. And I cringed perhaps twice as much when Joe Kinnear held his first press conference in Newcastle, and I think he was timed as 49 swear words in the first 11 minutes of the press conference, which rather set the tone for the topsy-turvy. I mean, there was part of Joe as a bloke that you loved because he was quite twinkly-eyed, Irish imp, but as a manager, oh dear me, he left a lot to be desired. And all of this is off the top of my head. And one other cringe moment, because I've always loved number 9s. I mean, as a Geordie, I've been brought up on number 9 legends, way back with Hughie Gallagher through everybody with War Jackie and Supermac, of course, and right up Tyne Shearer. And then I remember Newcastle during Bill McGarry's time signing a centre forward called Mike Larnock, who was to play centre forward for Newcastle in the legendary number 9 shirt. Never managed to score a goal for us, but I actually did see him score a goal in black and white stripes for the reserves at St James's Park when the ball was played to him in the penalty area, and he took it and it was bobbling round his knees, and he ran on trying to control it, and it kept bobbling and it kept bobbling, and suddenly he stopped because he was in the back of the net, up against the net. He'd run the ball into the net trying to control it to have a shot, and that was his one goal in black and white. And when we've had so many wonderful centre forwards, and you'll be pleased that I didn't put Chris Wood in this because that is your hero. Mike Larnock was definitely the man that made me think, should we not have not given him the number 9 shirt, because that's as worse as the number 9 shirt got, and we've had a few bad ones. But they leap to mind. What are you going to add to the list?
I'm going to let the chat take over. I mean, they've come up with a couple of the ones that I was thinking of. There's some absolutely great stuff. Barry Hogan goes back to the days of Jack. He says, I used to cringe when he described Waddle and Beardsley as big lad and little lad, which is a good one. Any of Joe Kinnear's after-match interviews, says Paul. Andrew says every moment with Bruce and McLaren. Barry mentions Joe Kinnear's 68 F's rant during a press conference. Of course, Simon Bird getting the majority of them. Barry Hogan saying Michael Owen wearing the shirt. I hated him more than Ryan Fraser. Paul Patterson says cringeworthy moments, no particular order. Boya Dyer fight on the pitch. Stephen Taylor's swan dives. Dennis Wise being director of football. Alan Pardew headbutting a player. And Rude Hullett's Derby Day team sheet. Those are his. Being asked to chant at the match for the goal film, says Les. Ian Brownlee, Mickey Owen. Refusing to play versus Villa on relegation day 3. And Stephen Kennedy says, my cringeworthy moment, Irving Natras and cronies on local TV fighting for Richard Dennis to get the manager's job. Denise says that my cringe moment was when we watched Pope handle a ball outside his area when we knew we were going to a cup final. Still love Pope though, but that was my cringe moment. Gary says the Shea Given and Dion Dublin moment was cringe. The only Irishman who didn't know where Dublin was. Les said Stephen Taylor getting shot, which is what it looked like every time he dived, and Dyer and Boyer fighting. Ian's come up with another Joe Kinnear classic as well. Scouting Shane Ferguson when he was our player at the time, which is an absolute belter. David as well, before he left, said Hereford loss and Dyer and Boyer fighting on the pitch for me, and in Dyer and Boyer as well. Ian remembers that one. So some great stuff there.
Brilliant ones. Ones.
Yeah, Shiraz McDonald's advert, says Dean. Yeah, that was pretty cringeworthy. And Tamuri Ketchbuyer kicking lumps out the advertising boards while trying to do a striptease. And McLaren looking like he was with his looking like he was with his career CM De Jong when telling the sub to hurry off. All right, okay, I remember that. Yeah. And Denise Applewhite says, I cringe every time someone says, I would love it if we. And Mark Byers, again, chipping in with another one. He says, just Steve Bruce just made me cringe being associated with the club. He doesn't like Bruno G in the crowd up either. He cringes when that happens. And Alan, I'll give you the last one. Kieran Dyer and Lee Boyer fighting each other against Aston Villa. Stephen Taylor getting sent off. Joe Kinnear, Steve Bruce both being manager, and Mike Ashley drinking at the Emirates. And Keegan and the Honey Monster advert, says Barry. Some brilliant ones, John.
Absolutely wonderful ones, and it only makes you realize what we've put up with throughout the years, doesn't it? Boyer and Dyer fighting, which repeatedly got. I mean, there were two like flyweights fighting for the Northeast area title, weren't there? I mean, it was handbag at 16 paces, and just before that, I mean, when Taylor got sent off, you'd think he'd been shot. I mean, it was the most embarrassing thing. He went down as if he'd been absolutely felled when no one was near him, but he was giving away a penalty, etc. We've had some awful ones. We've had some terrible ones. And let's hope most of them are behind us now, because I tell you what, it was easier to come up with them for the punters, and didn't they do terrific off the top of the head and quickly having to do it. Then if you think, give us out your best 20 moments, your best 20 moments would probably struggle more outside of Paris Saint-Germain, and would probably struggle more to put those 20 moments, because we've had too many cringe ones over the years, haven't we? But it's a lot of fun, and as I've said in the past, and we'll probably do this sometime in the future, Steve, when even though we might get we might get sued legally, but talking about your worst 11 ever in Newcastle United's history would cause some fun and get some reaction from punters as well, because my job would have a list for that team.
We would do, mate. We'll get yours done before Christmas. That'll be a good one for people to watch, definitely. Sam says, question for John: did Joe Harvey ever ask for John's opinion or for advice?
I mean, he did. I love Joe, and he was a wonderful, wonderful man. He was a warm man, and he was an absolutely terrific manager, mainly for two reasons. His man management was excellent, and his ability to spot talent was excellent. He was never a coach. He never pretended to be a coach. He employed people to coach, like Keith Birkinshaw and Dave Smith. But yeah, he did, and on lots of occasions it was to do with handling the press and handling the public. He would say something to me, and I'd say, "Joe, don't go down that road, mate. It won't go down well with the punters, etc., etc." And so he was never above. He was always open to advice. It didn't mean that he would take it, but he wanted to hear it. He wanted to hear an alternative to what he was thinking, just because all of a sudden it might open up a whole new avenue to him and say, "Crikey, shall we go down this road or that road, or what should we do?" But I always remember one story with Joe. He would mark my card when I had individual meetings with him, and he marked my card on what the team was going to be for this game away from home. I think it was at Southampton, and I carried a story in the paper where I didn't say it was from Joe. I just forecast that a young boy called Barker would make his debut and a couple of senior players would be left out. Barker actually only learned about it in the paper. When he saw it in the paper, he thought he was going as the 14th, 15th man. There was only 12 involved in games. And he's always said to me since, "Gibbo, when I read it in the paper, I thought, blimey, I'm not going to be his sub." And sure enough, he played. But I also remember that a couple of them, I forecast, and I got a lot of forecasts right in those days, and I wondered why. And it was mainly because I was talking with Uncle Joe, and I forecast a couple of senior players would be dropped for this match at Southampton, and the wives saw the paper on the Friday night. Everybody was tucked up in the hotel, Southampton, and phoned up and said, "Hey, you're not going to be playing." No. So they went loopy and went and saw Joe and said, "Hey, are you not playing me?" or whatever. And Joe was in such a panic. He'd worked out what train I was on from Newcastle to London, London to Southampton, and he was standing outside the hotel, outside the actual hotel itself, waiting for me walking up from the station to say to me, "Gibbo, there's hell on in there. There's a rebellion on with all the players. For goodness sake, don't say anything about how you got that team selection or if it's right or wrong." And I wasn't going to, of course. But the amazing thing is, the next day, these two senior players who learned they were going to be dropped through the paper were dropped, and that's how lucky I can get. And sometimes you can get very lucky just by being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, 100%. Good story, good question as well. Thank you for that. Cringy moments, Mark said, not for us, but for the fan who did the reveal of his appendage, John, after ASM scored. He says, "I bet he lives by the excuse it was a cold night." He says, "Nobody's mentioned punching the horse. The bloke punching the horse is a cringe moment." He says, "I've had Americans ask me about it. Are you all like that?" Shearer knocking Keith Gillespie out after a session in Dublin. He says, "Steve Howie tells the story." He says, "That's another cringe moment." Singing Mike Ashley's belly wasn't a good look. Another cringe moment. And Cabaye refusing to play, says Dean, when Arsenal was sniffing around him. He also chips in with anything that Barry Venison wore. Was embarrassing and cringeworthy, which is interesting. Sutty, thank you for your question. He says, "Has Gibbo heard anything on who might replace Darren Eales?"
No, not really at this stage, because the way things are with that, Darren, I mean, it's awful when anyone has any sort of health scare and it's a blood disorder, cancer. It's a dreadful, dreadful thing, and the boy's only 52, etc., etc. But the way it is, he is physically, I mean, he wants to stand back to look after himself and to look after his family, and that is 100% right, 200% right, and all our best wishes go out to him. The situation is that it's early in this diagnosis and the way it will be handled, and he's able to work, if not indefinitely, for anything up to another year before you would have to move out of the firing line permanently. And he is a great workaholic. He is a man with a track record. Remember, he was with Atlanta, the club that sold. He was involved in selling Miggy to Newcastle United from his American club, and he is willing and wants to work on indefinitely while Newcastle go through the right process. So they're not going to be left without a top man, because he will continue until that process uh, produces his replacement, and then he'll step away. So we're not going to go through a period like we did after Dan Ashworth, while we waited for Paul Mitchell and we had nobody in the seat. He will sit in the seat. So we're in a very early throes of looking to replace him, and it is early doors. They haven't gone down a route where anybody's earmarked for it, and he is going to help and give advice to the board on who that person might be. So it will be done at a sedate pace, which means no blind panic, because Darren can continue in the meantime.
Yeah, just a shout out as well for people in the chat. If you want to go across and subscribe to that website, we're going to do a match day live. I'm not going to Goodison this weekend, so I am going to do a match day live, but on a new platform. Now, this new platform is called Big Up, and it's a lot different to YouTube. We're not going to be moving everything over there. We're doing this as a bit of a favor for an American company called Big Up. But if you pop onto there, it's specifically for watch-alongs, but we're going to be able to do something that nobody else can do on there. So subscribe. You'll see what happens on Saturday. And yeah, it's something a bit groundbreaking, I think, for us on NUFC Matters. So I'll not say any more. Just sign up to it. All you need to do is subscribe, like you do on YouTube, and we will see you on Saturday. I'll give that a shout out again tomorrow. Okay, I've got about 15 minutes left. I have got quite a few questions to get through. I don't think we'll get through them all because there's a lot of cringe. Lauren Robert's underpants, says Paul.
Yes.
Remember that? Denise says, with Everton on the horizon, the bloke tying himself to the goalpost and the size of the cutters to free him. I also remember the person with a knife in the crowd who handed a knife to one of the stewards, and the steward handed the knife back, Denise, if I remember rightly. That was just mad. Mark Bayer says, biggest cringe I've seen at St James's Park was Les Ferdinand cringing when the crowd sang about his relationship with Danny Bear. So yeah, I do remember that.
I do remember that. I tell you another one, we're doing them all off the top of our head, was when we signed Kevin Keegan as a player, and we were in the doldrums of the second division, going nowhere fast and lucky to anticipate dates of 10,000 plus. And all of a sudden we signed the England skipper. And Russell Cushing, who was a lovely friend of mine and was the long-term secretary at Newcastle, I'd heard from Laurie McMenemy what time Kevin Keegan was getting in, and that it was Kevin Keegan, etc. So I broke the story in the paper, and I was at the press conference Gosford Park Hotel that night, and on worked Russell Cushing, and he was told to say, "Where in heaven we've got Kevin." And I've never seen anybody that had to produce a line be so embarrassed, because he obviously thought it was terribly naff, and he wasn't one of the world's great ad-libbers, and it was almost nauseating to listen to hear dear old Russell tell the world we're in heaven because we've got Kevin. But as it turned out, he was absolutely spot on. We were in heaven. We got up, and then we got him back as manager, and we got the entertainers. So It was true, but it was a cringe-worthy moment, believe you me.
John, Football Mad says, what do you think of FIFA's proposals today to allow those competing in Club World Cup to allow those competing to sign players from the 1st of June, while everyone else has to wait until the usual start date? I haven't seen that, John, but that's an interesting one, isn't it?
No, I haven't seen that either, and it's not going to involve us for the next season and a half. but it does give an advantage to. Well, you would think it would be Man City, or an outside chance it would be in Arsenal, and Man City's had far too much of an advantage to start with. But yes, it is one that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, me neither. We'll have a look at that. Not a Newcastle fan like, but St James's Park, most new grounds are just corporate spaceships for clubs. They want to price old school fans out, and the atmosphere at these grounds is shocking. Yeah, it's an interesting point that you've made there, and yeah, we will have to wait and see. There's no news on the new stadium. Somebody just asking about Supermac mag debates. Yeah, we touched on it at the start. Slow road to recovery, but he's out of hospital, mag debates, which is the main thing. Okay, we did have another question. Where was that? There we go. John, with Isak not in the Sweden squad for the Nations League game this month, that would indicate, as expected, he will miss Newcastle's game with Everton on Saturday. Would you give Asula a game? I think for me it would be Gordon, John.
Yeah, looking at it to start with, talking about the Isak situation, from Newcastle's point of view, he had no chance, with hindsight, of playing against Man City, and they were desperate for him to play. He would have been left out of the League Cup anyway, but because they would have rested him, even if he was fit. But if you then look at the situation, would you risk him at Everton, where the fact that it would be a huge risk and could knock him back for ages? Because if you played him at Everton, you had to let him go away with Sweden for 2 more games. So that was far too much. Newcastle, there was never a chance of him playing at Everton, because that will mean he hasn't played the last 3 games for Newcastle. Sweden have already accepted that, and so they've left him out. He won't play their 2 games, so he's going to get a fortnight's rest there, and he's already had almost a fortnight's rest with us. So there was no chance. If we played him against Everton, he had to go away with Sweden. When we don't play him against Everton, he doesn't have to go away with Sweden. So he's not going to play. And no, I wouldn't give Asula a chance. I think I wouldn't give him a start at Everton. He'll be on the bench. He can come on if necessary. He's not ready. He's tomorrow's man rather than today's man. He's a lovely kid. He's quick. He's got potential, but he's well short. And bear in mind, his performance against in the League Cup was promising, etc., but it was against League Two. That's a lot different to being playing in the Premier League. And also, Anthony Gordon did terrific against Man City, and has to go again. The great thing for me, though, Steve, it will be Anthony Gordon without a shadow of doubt. It'll not be Asula, and it'll not be Isak. It'll be Anthony Gordon. What worries me is that if we're harsh, however well Anthony Gordon played against Man City, and he did because he stretched them, he ran in behind them, they didn't know where he was. He is not a 25-goal centre forward. He's not a 25-goal centre forward. So it's a step down from Isak. Now he's in England outside left. And Harvey Barnes, despite his ability to score goals, is not as good an outside left as Anthony Gordon. If he was, he'd be in the England team ahead of Anthony Gordon. And he isn't in the England team ahead of Anthony Gordon. So we're not so well off at outside left with Isak out, and we're not as well off at centre forward with Isak out. So it is a problem. But you know what I find fascinating about going to Everton, Steve, is it's going to be Gordon at centre forward against Pickford in goal. Now, both are hated by the other fans. Gordon's hated by the Everton fans because he manufactured his move to Newcastle. Pickford's hated by the Newcastle fans because he's a Mackem that winds up our fans, and we off wind them up in return. So both are hated. Both are going to get pelted with verbal abuse during the whole game. What I'm concerned about is that I want Gordon to show as much courage at Goodison as he does on the field of play. When he gets, I mean, he attacks the fullback. He can go inside or outside. He is hammered to the ground repeatedly, but he gets back up, albeit after 15 sausage rolls on the pitch, of course, to make certain we get the free kick. But he gets back up and he runs at the defenders again. He's got great courage on the pitch. He's going to have to show that courage with all the verbal abuse he's going to get from the terraces, and it's going to be absolutely relentless. And he'll know that, and he's got to put up with that. I'm not certain he handled it well the last time he went to Everton with us. He's got to handle it well this time. But it's going to be interesting, Gordon v. Pickford. Former teammates at Everton, still teammates with England, and both hated by the other fans. Our contingent of supporters will give Pickford some upsy daisy, and Everton will give Gordon some upsy daisy. Who's going to come out the best of the two? I'm hoping it's our boy.
Yes, welcome to Golden Goal Fantasy Football. I met him on a YouTube conference today. Nice guy. He's got a great channel. Go and give him a sub. Thank you for popping in. And I'm going to pop onto his show at some point as well, which would be great. But nice to meet somebody else in the YouTube community. John, I desperately want us to beat Everton, but the last two occasions we have played poorly. I must admit, I'm worried with no strikers, says Alan. And Tom says, I'd like to see Gordon score a few goals past Pickford on Saturday night. I think we'd all enjoy seeing that. Newcastle, of course, travel to Goodison Park. It is our last game at Goodison Park. They are moving to their new stadium next season, of course. It's a 5:30 kickoff. It's live on Sky Sports. Early team news for Newcastle. Again, no Callum Wilson, no Sven Botman, no Jamal Lascelles or Lewis Miley. Alexander Isak is also predicted to be missing with his toe problem. He's been omitted from the Swedish squad, as we've already discussed. Martin Dubravka isn't in the latest Slovakian squad, suggesting that the leg injury that forced him off at half-time against Wimbledon is significant, although I haven't had confirmation of that. We'll wait for Eddie's press conference at the weekend. News on the availability of Nick Pope, Fabian Schär, Kieran Trippier, and Matt Targett is to be confirmed. But Pope's selection for England implies that he is okay. Just a reminder as well that Joe Linton is now one booking away from a one-match ban after collecting 4 yellow cards, which is something Joe likes to collect. People he hasn't cottoned on yet that he misses out on games when he gets these when he gets so many bookings. Everton are missing Chimiti, Broja, Coleman, and Patterson. They're all out, and just on league form, Everton have begun the season with 4 Premier League defeats, but Sean Dyche's side have picked up a point against Leicester, and then they beat Crystal Palace at the weekend. Mark Gahey, of course, much chased by Newcastle in the summer, got the consolation goal for Palace. Tom mentioned in the chat earlier that the referee's Craig Pawston. This is the second Toon game of the season for him. He was in charge of the Southampton game where Fabian Schär got a red card. He was also allocated to the Carabao Cup game at Wimbledon, but didn't get the return fixture this week. And on VAR, it is Chris Kavanagh. And just a reminder, if you are going down there, we've had an update from TransPennine Express. The 2106 Liverpool Lime Street to Newcastle service will terminate at York. An additional York to Newcastle service will depart at 7 minutes past 11. There is no connection between these two train services. And if you're travelling between Liverpool and Newcastle, you should travel on earlier train services to complete your journey. So that is all the information. John, what are you looking at this game? What are you expecting?
Well, I want a good ending to a good week. The good week was started off with a terrific draw with Man City. We then reached the last 16 of the League Cup. I don't care how we made it. The point is we did make it and we're there. And before we go into the international break, this match is absolutely crucial. And I'm going to use what I use all the time. It's a must-win situation. Why is it a must-win situation? because we've only taken, despite the result against City being terrific, we've only taken 1 point out of the last 6. And once the international break is over, we've got Brighton, Chelsea, and Arsenal to come in the lead. Now, that's not easy. I think we can tickle the tummy of Brighton easily enough, but Chelsea away, Arsenal at home, difficult. Far from impossible, but difficult. So the cushion, if 3 points got against Everton, will do us a world of good, and it will send us into the break in a very good fettle as well. So I think the result is absolutely crucial. The first thing we've got to do is make certain we don't lose. But I'm wanting to go a step further than that. Everton are no great shakes, have just won the first match down there. You know what I want to see, Steve? We have proved time and again we can raise our game against the good sides. And we did that against Manchester City. What we've got to do to make the top 4 for the Champions League, or at least the top 6 for Europe, what we've got to do is make certain we beat sides away from home that we're expected to beat, because that's sometimes where we fall down, away from home with bad results like Fulham was, and we've had a few of them last season. I'm looking for us to, it might not be pretty, it might be tougher, because Everton will try to make the match ugly, because that gives them their best chance. They'll try to make the match ugly. So I'm going for a 2-1 Newcastle win. Tough match, ugly match a lot of the time, but I don't care as long as we win. And I think it'll be hard, but I think we can do it by a single goal, and I would go 2-1.
Okay, Golden Goal Fantasy says 3-1 to you lot for me. Both teams need the points. Both not looking too good defensively. I find that Newcastle can keep it tight against anyone at St James's, but not so much away. It's a good point, that, to be perfectly honest. And just finishing off with a few more cringeworthy moments and a question from Stephen Kennedy. A quick one for John. I'll go for the question first. Okay, John, which was your favourite, the Likely Lads or whatever happened to the Likely Lads?
I'm going to go for the Likely Lads because it was completely new. It was a wonderful thing. I found it terrific. It was my big mate at the time when he became my big mate, Ian Lafreniere. It was during the success of the Likely Lads he became my big mate. I got to know Rodney Bewes ever so well during that period, and happy memories. The whatever happened to the Likely Lads was the follow-on, and yes, it was good. The amazing thing is that the two guys didn't particularly get on well in the long term, Rodney Bewes and Jimmy Bolam, but they were a terrific team on screen. And I'm biased, but I think Lafreniere is one of the great script writers of television and of films. And for me, the Likely Lads was the breakthrough. But I also, if you go on, I oft liked Off Wiedersehen, and a lot of people don't realise Ian wrote a lot of Lovejoy with Ian McShane, who I got to know very well, whose dad played for Manchester United when he was a fanatical, still is, a fanatical supporter of football. So all happy days. I had Ian up at the match up here recently as my guest in the press box. He sent us a big email after we got the draw with City saying, fabulous, best performance of the season. I was dreading the game, loved it. Typical Joe.
Couple of cringeworthy moments. Alan Thompson says, cringeworthy moment for me, John, was when the chairman at the time, Stan Seymour, was at Anfield after we'd been beaten off Liverpool 4-0. It was the first ever live TV game. You don't expect us to beat them at home, do you? Said Stan. I remember that. And Ian Brownlee said, Steve Bruce saying that he recommended Eddie Howe to Amanda for the manager's role. That's cringe. Lee, that was a great suggestion, that, mate. Really, really good. Denise says, brilliant once again, John. Thank you. Take care, Steve. See you tomorrow. Thank you, Denise. And John, did you watch Bangers in Cash? He says. Never. Bangers in Cash? Not sure what that is.
It's about buying old cars.
All right, okay.
But I mean, I just know how to drive them. I don't know anything about under the bonnet. I mean, in the good old days when the cigarette thing was full of dumps, I used to sell the car because I didn't know how to empty it.
Dear me.
That's how much I knew about cars.
A great show. As always, we will pass on all your best wishes to Supermac and hopefully wish him a speedy recovery. John and I will be back next week. And my prediction for the Everton game is, again, like John, I think it'll be a 2-1 win to Newcastle. So let's hope we come back with the 3 points and move on and onwards and upwards. John, see you next week, mate.
Take care, pal.